Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see you all. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Farah Kilidar, the CEO of the World Affairs Council. Welcome to our event today. We made a point of playing the 60-minute documentary that was done on our speaker, Dr. Azzam Alwash, and I believe most of you got a chance to watch at least some of it, and that would have been the perfect introduction to Dr. Alwash. But nevertheless, I'd like to highlight that Dr. Azzam is an American of Iraqi origin who left Iraq in 1978 as he refused to join the Ba'ath Party. He moved to Southern California and he worked there for 20 years as an engineer, a consultant, until 2003 when he decided to go back to Iraq to reflood the marshes. Dr. Azzam is the CEO and founder of Nature Iraq, a non-profit created to protect, restore, and preserve Iraq's natural environment and the rich cultural heritage that it nourishes. He was awarded in 2013 the Goldman Prize. It's an environmental prize. You could say it's equivalent to the Oscars. It's the Green Oscars, if you wish. He was also named as one of the 100 leading global thinkers by Foreign Policy magazine in 2013. He did refer to that as the old model, but I think it continues to this day. Please join me in welcoming our speaker for tonight, Dr. Azzam Alwash.
An American who can't spell. I'm an engineer, what can I say? The word Iraq, okay, I gotta stay here, right? The word Iraq brings to the mind of many of you images of, well, desert, of war, of oil, of Saddam Hussein and his weapons of mass destruction. The word Iraq, to me and many of the Iraqis in this audience, brings pictures that you hardly ever see. Snow-capped, majestic mountains in the north that yield their water come spring in a couple of months to these majestic valleys that give their waters to the Tigris and Euphrates, the eternal rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates headwaters are in the mountains of what is called Kurdistan. And southern Iraq is what we call a sedimentary plain. Now, think of the word sedimentary. I'm sure many of you are geologists or involved in oil. Sedimentary means soil got transported from one place to another by water and then got sedimented out of the water column. Essentially, southern Iraq is the gift of the mountains of Kurdistan. The link between the mountains of Kurdistan and southern Iraq predates humanity. It is a lot more organic than people give it credit today. We think of the Kurds as separate than Arabs. I say the ecology and nature supersedes humanity. Be that as it may, southern Iraq, remember, the flood is going to come in 2 months as the season turns and the snow starts melting. All this water wants to get down to the Gulf. But the Gulf, Shatt al-Arab is a very small conduit. It cannot handle all that water. So what happens, we have floods in southern Iraq. Every year we had a flood since the last ice age ended. So in southern Iraq, all right, technical difficulties. Next. So southern Iraq, instead of being a barren desert like the area around it, is in fact a water world. A water world, the trees of which are reeds. Inside this water world, there are lakes, and inside these lakes, a people that are as old as history live. The Ma'dan of southern Iraq are what most people consider the cradle of civilization. They are the starters of the civilization. If you look at the way they live, it is no different than the way the Ma'dan has lived. Their way of life is completely dependent on reeds. From the reeds they build their islands, from the reeds they build their houses, they put the reeds in their ovens to bake their bread, They feed the reeds to their water buffalo. They even wove nets to capture fish from reeds. Now, why do we call this the cradle of civilization? Ladies and gentlemen, this is where writing was invented, as a banking instrument, by the way. It is where the wheel was invented. It is where Abraham was born. It is where the creation myth, the flood, the Noah's story is in fact a Sumerian story. And you look at the way of life, you look at these houses, they're no different than the clay tablets from 5,000 years ago, documenting the way of life of the Marshes. So I'm not going to talk too much about the history. You know the connection. To me, when I was growing up in Iraq, we looked down upon the Marsh Arabs. We kind of view them like you all view, Appalachia. They're backwards people. We look down upon them. It is not until I came to the United States and started reading history and started comparing that I realized that these are our living links to history. This is a false color picture showing the marshes in their glory in 1973. This is the Tigris, this is the Euphrates that goes into Hammar Marsh. This is called Hammar Marsh. This is the Central Marshes. This is Huwayza Marsh that is shared between Iraq and Iran. Red to you, I don't want to go into the science, but red should mean very luscious vegetation covered land or area. And the redder, the more dense the vegetation is. And this picture is from 1997. The lakes that used to exist became salt-barren, salt-covered deserts. The area that was reed-covered became just as barren as the soil around it. What remained of the marshes, 700 square kilometers, look at how sickly the vegetation cover is compared to how lush it was. What happened? What happened was Saddam in 1991 lost control over Iraq until Schwarzkopf allowed him to use helicopters to crush the rebellion. The rebels who were crushed did as their ancestors have done for a millennia, or 2 or 3 or 4. They went inside the marshes to escape the wrath of the Sheriff of Baghdad. They hid inside the marshes, and in fact, the southern Iraq was under the control of the rebels at night, and Saddam and his army would only control the cities during the day. Now, Saddam knew that these rebels could be used by the West to undermine his rule. Being the dictator that he is, he actually then used the entire GDP of the nation of Iraq at a time when it was not allowed to sell a single drop of water, of oil. This is 91 through 96. Remember, the MOU with the United Nations was not signed until 1996. Saddam used literally every piece of equipment, heavy equipment that was available in Iraq in the excavation of 6 rivers, and I have no idea how many thousands of kilometers of embankments, the dirt of which had to be trucked in from almost like 100 to 150 kilometers away. It's an incredible engineering project, a project that the United Nations called the worst engineered environmental disaster of the last century. Now, the United Nations is not known for speaking really tough. These are really tough words in terms of United Nations speak. As a result of this project to drain the marshes, an area that looked like this in 1975 in my childhood looked like this by 2003 when I visited. I cannot describe to you the level of pain one feels when one sees their childhood farm, childhood area become a barren desert. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what made me decide to go back to Iraq, drop everything that I had in Southern California, and go back. I wanted to restore the marshes. Before I went back in 2003, there was a lot of experts that said the marshes cannot be restored. The seed bank is too old. It's been 12 years. The Marsh Arab have moved away. The skills needed to survive in this world are gone. Furthermore, these people don't want to come back to the marshes. They've seen the cities. They've seen hospitals. They've seen their children don't want to come back. I went back to Iraq thinking that I would have to kind of convince the people to restore the marshes. Well, fortunately for me, that's a battle I did not have to fight. Before even I arrived in southern Iraq, the embankments were being broken by the people, but in a haphazard manner. What I did, and you saw it in the 60 Minutes if you were paying attention, is when I came back there, I started looking at the way the areas that have been flooded were behaving, and I figured out pretty soon from nature what works. You need the water to flow through. You need the water deeper than 2 meters. You need the water to not be stagnant. It's really very simple. Nature is very smart. She can show you how to heal. She's an incredible, incredible force. I have gained so much respect. Anyway, what happened was, one day, and I remember the day, the 16th of December 2003, I'm standing on top of this embankment looking at all the water of the Euphrates. The Euphrates is there. And it was flowing full. And we're saying all this water is being wasted. So we said, all right, we need to dig this. Well, obviously that's 7 meters high. That's 20 feet, 21 feet high. You cannot dig it. So I looked at a contractor who said, you have a backhoe, right? And this is a very large excavator, not just a small backhoe. Right, I want to rent it for a day. How much does it cost? He says, 500,000 Iraqi dinars. That's only $400, by the way. So the next day, the backhoe comes, they start excavating, and all they did was dig a small little trench all the way to the water level, and then the water took care of the rest. 3 months later, I come back and I think, oh my God, I created an environmental disaster, because you know what happened? All this water started coming into this area, and then it started collecting all the organic matter, and it was smelly, putrid, red water. It was death. It's like, okay, we'll keep this a secret. Then I come back 2 months later. It's amazing. It's amazing what nature can do in 6 months. Everything gets flushed out. All those experts that said that the seeds were too old, they have no idea what Phragmites can do. Ladies and gentlemen, it turns out the Phragmites australis is considered here an invasive species. They've been trying to get rid of it for 35 years in New Jersey. They can't. And fortunately for the Marsh Arabs, it's the most hardy of the flora kingdom. Once it gets there, you cannot kill it. You cannot burn it. The seeds will stay forever. They are like the carp of the flora kingdom. They live in brackish water. They live in salt water. They live in sweet water. They are incredible. Of course, now, once the reeds are back, the buffalo comes back, fishing comes back, and the way of life of the Marsh Arabs, it turns out it requires a lot more than 12 years for a 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 year old culture to die. It just doesn't die that fast. More importantly, this, ladies and gentlemen, is what the United Nations calls sustainable development. This is a way of life that is completely dependent on the environment, and this is restoration by the people for not the birds, well, partially for the birds because they like to hunt them. This is actually restoration for the livelihood of people. And as long as there are people who are dependent for their livelihood on the marshes are going to continue to exist. Isn't that most beautiful? Look at this. I'm very proud of this picture. This is a security road that was built after the marshes were dried, and ironically it became a very good way for the fishmongers to come in and start buying fish from fishermen and pack it in ice and take it to Baghdad. And you know, it's recycled. This is a tire. Yeah. Who needs Coleman? This is a picture. There's a documentary called Braving Iraq. And this picture is I took this when they were filming it, and it's one of the most amazing sights you ever seen. This is marble teal. It's an endangered species. The world known population at the time this picture was taken was 25,000 birds. In this picture, we counted 43,000. Don't ask me how. We didn't count them. We do like a square and caca the square, and I don't know the voodoo that the birders do. But there's 43,000 marble teal in this picture when the world known population was 25,000. This is an incredible story. It is. You know, you'd think I'm done. Right? The marshes have been declared by the national government as a national park. But like everything else in the Middle East, nothing is really, no, you can never say they lived happily ever after. You being interested in foreign policies, I want to talk to you about the future. The future of the Middle East is going to be about water. In an era of climate change, everybody thinks of dams as the silver bullet. This is how you can create electricity. This is how you can control water. This is how you can make civilization possible. I am here to tell you that I'm a chartered member of the Dams movement. I hate dams and I do not want to see another dam. I want to see all the dams decommissioned. But of course, I'm realistic too. It ain't going to happen in my lifetime. I can only educate, I can only plead, I can only talk to you about thinking about the consequences of dams. No engineering project has all positive effects. There are negative effects. Be that as it may, let's forget about that for now. Let's look at the picture of these dams. All these red dots in Turkey are huge dams. 33 huge dams have been built since 1991. The collective, well, actually no, let's talk about one dam, the Ataturk Dam. The reservoir capacity of that dam is 98 billion cubic meters. Let's call it 98 billion cubic yards. Close enough. The average flow of the Euphrates is 30 billion per year. So technically speaking, this reservoir can hold the water of the Euphrates for 3 years without releasing a drop of water. Remember I was telling you about the flood and how it drove what I didn't tell you is that the ecology of the marshes was driven by this pulse. The reason why agriculture lasted in Iraq for 7,000 years without fail is because of this pulse of flood that comes in every year in the spring. It washes the salt that accumulates from evaporation of the year before on the grasslands and the farmlands surrounding the marshes. It deposits a new layer of silt and clay. The Iraqi farmer, the Sumerian farmer, did not need fertilizer until 1975. They had natural fertilization going, right? And this pulse of flood comes in just as the reeds are coming out of winter hibernation, just as the birds are migrating, those mallards. It's just as the fish is spawning. It's an entire symphony of biodiversity driven by this drumbeat called the annual flood. This is 1930. 1975, we have something. A couple of dams were built on the Euphrates. This is a hydrograph from the Euphrates. But the drumbeat came back a little mute because the dams kind of take the peak off. But by 1990, something drastic has happened. There's more water in the summer, mind you, by the way. Okay, there's more water in the summer. But that peak, that natural peak, is gone. A similar story is happening here, or has been happening on the Colorado River. The Colorado River is getting choked downstream of the Hoover Dam because the annual floods that used to come in used to clean the sand, clean all the debris from that falls in the valley. Well, that clearing action has not happened since 1936. Now we're experimenting with what we call environmental flows, kind of increasing the flow in the spring, kind of try to create a mechanical flood of a sort. That's what's happening in the United States. But what's happening also the Gulf of California is that the water quality that's going in the Gulf of California is really bad. A similar story, by the way, is happening on the Tigris. It's even worse in the Tigris. I mean, look at this. It's incredible. Now, what is the effect of this? The effect of this is, okay, status quo ante for me as a marsh advocate is fine. As I told you, the reeds can live in brackish water, not a problem. What's going to happen, however, in Iraq, if Iraq does not reach an agreement with Turkey on the management of the water, agriculture, and I stand here in front of you and I'm willing to say it over and over again, and I will publish it. It will be published in the Scientific American, Scientific American in a couple of months. Agriculture is going to die in the land where it was born. Why? There's more water in the summer. What are you talking about, Azzam? Well, I'm telling you that the flood action that has happened, that used to happen, was an essential part of why agriculture lasted unfailingly for the last 8,000 years. Every year, the water comes in, it washes away the salt. Moreover, what has happened since 1975 is electricity has become available everywhere in the valley, and the lands upstream that used to be fed by rain, agriculture upstream of southern Iraq was done by rain. until electricity became available, mechanical pumping became available, more and more lands are being developed upstream by agriculture. Well, unfortunately, the Turkish farmer, the Iranian farmer, the Syrian farmer, and even the Iraqi farmer in northern Iraq is not paying for this water. So the irrigation practices of all these farmers remain as old as the Sumerian method itself. Flood irrigation. You don't pay for the water. Well, flood irrigation is all fine and dandy if you have floods that clean the soil and help nature heal itself. What's happening in the process, however, since 1975 is slowly all the drainage water is coming back into the Tigris and Euphrates, and if you're downstream, you're getting more saline water. And you're still using flood irrigation, so slowly, the agricultural farms of southern Iraq are dying. In fact, Ambar used to be, right now, okay, you eat rice, you love basmati, right? Basmati rice is everybody's favorite. Well, in Iraq, we have something called the Ambar rice. It's like legendary. I haven't tasted it. I don't know what it tastes like. It's something written in papers. It does not exist. Why? Because there is no sweet water. Simawa is an area that used to be famous for rice plantation because it was low and got flooded every year. Now there is no more rice plantation. Anyway, why did Turkey do this? Of course, Turkey did this GAP project to create electricity. At least that's what they said. Let's look, and if you go into Google, and I love Uncle Google, this is a map from 1975. It shows Turkey proposing water coming in from a river that dumps into the Mediterranean. It takes the water to Syria, dumps to Lebanon, goes to Jordan, a branch goes to Israel or Palestine, and Medina all the way to Mecca. It doesn't go to Yemen because Yemen gets its rain from its mountains. A branch goes around Iraq all the way to Kuwait. I mean, wouldn't you think that Kuwait could get water from Shatt al-Arab? But no, there's a long going to Kuwait, and then Bahrain, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, all the way to Oman. This is 1975. This is because before reverse osmosis became economical. Since 1975, however, this has died. This project called the Peace Pipelines has died, at least in this version. But Turkey proceeded to go ahead and build all these dams up north. In fact, Turkey today buys water from Bulgaria at a loss, just to establish the factoid that water is a commodity that can be bought and sold. In fact, they sell water, or they stopped doing that, but for a period they were selling water to Israel, and they used to fill it with polyurethane barges, and you drag it, and they delivered water to Israel. The project stopped. Now, when you go to conferences in Turkey, they're pretty clear about the reason for this dam. It's not about electricity, because they lose 50% of the electricity being generated in southeast Turkey. They need it in Istanbul. That's a long distance. That's about 1,200 kilometers, 1,300 kilometers. They lose 50% of the electricity to transmission. And this is part of the solution. I think let me talk to you about the future. Okay, so if we let it go the way it is going, tensions are going to increase. Iraq is weak. Iraq is not going to pick up fight with NATO, for goodness sake. Well, maybe there will be a crazy man, and who knows? Saddam could re-happen. So I'm not standing here in front of you telling you that there is going to be war. I'm telling you, however, that agriculture is going to die, because I know Iraqis. There is no way in hell Iraq is going to sell its historic right to this water. We have clay tablets, ladies and gentlemen, from 6,000 years ago, 5,500 years ago, that documents that we were the first one to develop the water of the Tigris and Euphrates. And there is no way an Iraqi parliament, worthy of the name, is going to sell that historic right. We are not going to sign a treaty exchanging water for petroleum. Well, the United States wants Iraq to be friend, they want Turkey to be friends. What is our interest? Our interest is to prevent that from happening, from this tension from happening. So what we need to do is change the discussion between Turkey and Iraq from whose water this is to how can we make a deal. So what I say to my Iraqi politicians, and if you live in Iraq, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Iraq's need right now for electricity is on average 17,000 megawatt. Our electrical generating capacity is 8,300 megawatt on a good day. And by the way, that's the average need. The peak need is about 34,000 megawatts. Okay? So Iraq will never build enough generation capacity to satisfy the needs. I mean, if you live in Iraq, the national grid is sort of, we call it the Christmas lights. On 2 hours are 4, on 2 hours are 4, and you know, everybody has a generator. I mean, we spend more than a third of our income on electrical generation. Because, well, it's like Houston, actually worse than Houston. You cannot live in the South without air conditioning in this. I mean, you cannot. I tried. You cannot. And so a good portion of our GDP goes into electrical generation. So what I say to the Iraqi politicians, hell, why don't you buy electricity from Turkey? Right? All that electricity, Turkey will have a 40% built-in profit. Right? Instead of transporting it all the way to Istanbul, they can cross the border and sell it to Iraq. And we have a very good national grid. There's a built-in profit there. Turkey will make money. And by the way, what did we do? We did not buy water. We bought electricity. So what does Turkey do to generate electricity? They have to release the water. Or buy petroleum from us and burn it, right? I mean, both ways we're winning. And we can actually buy that electricity for petroleum. Or better yet, gas. All that gas that's being burnt in southern Iraq, and there's going to be more and more gas being built, associated gas being from increased production. If we can put it in pipelines and get it all the way to Turkey, and then from there take a U-turn and go, or not U-turn, but a left turn, go to the Ukraine, we can actually compete with Russia for the European market. Trade. The name of the game is trade. I have more crazy solutions like this. You know, there's carbon trading. There's all sorts of outside the box thinking. I mean, Iraq can actually, and that gas that I was telling you about, for $1 billion, Iraq can convert that gas into miles and miles and what miles? Hundreds of thousands of miles of plastic pipe. And if I were the Iraqi government, I'd give these pipes for free to the Turkish farmer, to the Syrian farmer, not because we love them, but because we love ourselves. Because every drop that is used in Turkey, that is not used in Turkey, will come back to us. Every drop of drainage water that does not go into the Tigris and Euphrates is going to improve the quality of water that gets to us. So we do it not to help them, but do it to help ourselves. For $1 billion, ladies and gentlemen, I can solve this. For the price of what? 2 F-16s? I don't know how much are we selling the F-16s to Iraq? For $250 million a piece? For the price of 4 F-16s, which you can't use against Daesh anyway, right? You can solve this problem. All right, more outside the box. We have something called the Mosul Dam. If you've been listening to the news, on June 10th, Mosul was taken over by ISIS. Now we call it ISIS. It was ISIL. It's IS. We call it Daesh. Crazies. Okay, they control Mosul Dam. Mosul Dam has 11 billion cubic meters of water. If they breach Mosul Dam, the city of Mosul will be under 20 feet of water 20 meters of water within 3 hours. That's 60 feet. Baghdad would be under 15 feet of water within 5 days. Think of how many villages are going to be demolished, how many people are going to die, how many people are going to be dislocated. It is what we call the Samson option. If I was an IS strategist, don't tell them. I would take Mosul Dam and put TNT in there and say, if you hit me, I'm going to bring down the temple on me and you. And they're there permanently. Well, fortunately, we got the Mosul Dam back, at least for now. I don't know. And now, the Army Corps of Engineers, by the way, called this dam the most dangerous dam in the world. Why? Because they built it on top of a gypsum layer. Saddam decided that's where it's going to go, and whatever Saddam says, you do. So the minute they start filling this dam, reservoir with water, we started having piping. The water starts going underneath the dam, undermining the foundations of the dam. Iraq has been grouting 24/7 since 1982. We have no idea how much concrete went in there. Right, so status quo ante with respect to this dam is not possible. This dam is going to be breached sooner or later. We need to continue putting grout. Now they're talking about spending something. It increased from $3 billion. Now they're talking about $9 billion on an experiment that will build a dam underneath this dam. It's called a slurry cutoff wall. 200 meters deep, 600 feet. It has never been done. They're trying to build machines that will build this dam underneath this dam. I know water, and I know soils, and I'm telling you, this is a failed experiment. The government bureaucrats love it because God knows how much of this $10 billion is going to go into Swiss bank accounts. But let's take this aside. I'm saying if you have $10 billion, please put it in the bank and give me the interest. Right? What's the interest of $10 billion? 500 million. I'll go to Turkey and I say, here's $100 million, Turkey. I'll give you $100 million a year. Lease me a Liso Dam. Liso Dam, they're beginning filling it right now. If they fill the entire reservoir, World Heritage City is going to be submerged with water. Hassan Cave. We tell them, okay, we're going to fill this reservoir to 3/4 only. What I want to do is store Iraqi water in Turkish lands, and I'll pay you $100 million a year. Right? Now, I will tell the Iraqis, this $100 million a year, you basically saved it from saving of evaporation. Mosul is at elevation 400. Aliso is at elevation 1,500 meters. Okay? Mosul Dam Lake is huge. The surface area is huge. And we lose 2 meters to evaporation a year. If we take that water and store it in a small valley with a small surface area at a higher elevation, we save, 70% of that evaporative water. We just paid for it. I mean, when you consider that the price of a bottle of water is what, $1, $1.50? I mean, literally, actually, the water in your bottles is more expensive than the benzene that you put in your cars. All right, so, okay, I've bored you enough. The idea here, ladies and gentlemen, is to increase trade between Turkey and Iraq. I'll end with this thought. My goal and Daesh's goal is the same. Daesh wants to create a borderless Middle East under a Khalifa. I want to create a borderless Middle East with a republic. How are we going to get there? They're going to do it with cutting heads. I say we do it with trade. What am I talking about? I'm talking to you about the European Agricultural Union, which was started in 1957, 12 years after the end of World War II. After 2 world wars, and I don't know how many hundreds of years of wars between the Europeans, they finally figured it out. It's about trade, boys and girls. And the solution is no different in the Middle East. The more trade we have, the less incentive there is for tension. And that's inevitably going to be the solution. Water is going to be the backbone of that agreement. I even see a potential for water being transported from the Euphrates all the way to Jordan and all the way to the Dead Sea and maybe even to Palestine and Israel, to solve that problem, because they have their own tension problem on the Jordan River. Anyway, I think that's enough. The solution to the future is thinking outside the box and taking water as the axis upon which we will build a future Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azzam. Hello, can you hear me? Now you can. I'll just share with you a little bit as to how I came across Dr. Azzam and invited him. I, in 1993, watched a documentary which you mentioned in your talk, Saddam's Killing Fields. And it was a heart-wrenching documentary. It was talking about the Marsh Arabs as well as Saddam's attacks in the South generally, and the massacres that took place, and how the world remained silent, even though the Americans were on the border still. And I remember at the end of that documentary, I don't know if you remember, there was an old lady who was a refugee at that point on the Iranian border. And she just simply said in the end, the birds have died, the people have died, the world has died. There is no water, there is no bread, we are naked in despair. And that stayed in my mind over the years until in 2010 I watched the documentary that was done about you by the BBC to begin with. And I remember thinking, this is the kind of man that Iraq, the Middle East, and the world needs. And at the end of this discussion, I will show you an image that made me cry when I saw it. So what I'd like to ask you is really two questions. One is, why do you think the world stayed silent in the 90s when all of this was happening? And two, when most people in the last 3, 4, 5 years would have skipped town, left Iraq, as most people have, you have gone all in. And I know your answer to me, I like to get to know my speakers. His answer to me was because I'm crazy, but I'd like to think there's more to it than that. Can you elaborate as to why you've stayed in Iraq all these years?
So we'll start with the first question. The Kurds, okay, so when the rebellion was crushed in March of 1991, who of you remember Operation Provide Comfort? CNN was in the north of Iraq documenting the fleeing of the Kurds who feared another, the wrath of Saddam, because they've seen it in 1988 as a result of the Iraq-Iran war and the Anfal project in which he destroyed 5,000 villages. And the Kurds were lucky. What do you mean lucky? CNN was there documenting their misery, which moved the West to act. CNN was not in the south. The same thing was happening in the south of Iraq, but CNN was not there. Smartphones have not been invented yet. That's the tragedy of southern Iraq. Had the atrocities being committed in the south been documented, I guarantee you, you as American, we as American would not have stood for letting Saddam stay in Baghdad. And the sanctions would not have been needed, and the suffering would have not been. There is unintended consequences to not complete. I mean, Iraq is still today. I mean, okay, the Iranians still talk about 1952 Mossadegh and what the United States did to them. I mean, this is an injury to their national pride. Iraqis still remember 1991. Why should we trust you? All right, let's take that aside. Why does a successful engineer leave their practice to go back to Iraq? It's crazy. But let's go back to 2003. 2003 is different than 2013 or 2014. Iraq potential is huge, and it remains huge. Iraq has water, Iraq has land, Iraq has people, Iraq has heritage, Iraq has oil. It has the potential to become the Germany of this union I'm telling you about. What it lacks is visionary leadership. And you know what? I call me naive, I still have a belief in democracy. All right, so let's talk about Iraq and the future. Iraqis have tried royalty, have tried socialism, have tried militarism, have tried Ba'ath and nationalism. They haven't tried Islamism. Boy, are they trying it. Sooner or later, the Iraqi people are going to rebel against the Islamic parties that are leading. Okay, and I mean, I can go into more detail about this. Okay, so Saddam is not stupid. Neither was Muammar Gaddafi, neither was Mubarak, neither was Jamal. All of the dictators of the Arab world set about emptying the streets of any viable potential opposition that is secular. And if it was in their ability to close down the mosques, they would have. They couldn't. And so what remains, if you want to express opposition, the only outlet for you as a young citizen is to go to the mosque, where you become prey to this weird thoughts. Oh, we need to go back to the Islamic age of golden Islam 1200 years ago. All right, well, it's a theory. Communism is a beautiful theory. It just can't be applied. Islamism is a beautiful theory. It just can't be applied. Anyway, the Iraqis are now testing it. The problem, of course, in Iraq is that we have sectarianism. Of course, Iraq is now being... It's a war by proxy, right? Saudi Arabia is afraid of Iran. Israel is afraid of Iran. Turkey is afraid of Iran. Now the Shia are the majority. And so you have that going for you. and so... And of course, the irony is that the Islamic parties, both Shia and Sunni, just before any election, they turn on the heat on sectarianism because that's the only way they can stay in their seats. And so we have many Milosevic's. But the Iraqis are not stupid. Iraqis know that this is happening. And by the way, IS is going to be defeated. Sooner or later, it's going to be defeated. These militias that are fighting, they're going to come back and they want their due. They're not going to... They're not going to sit still and say, okay, boys, you enjoy Baghdad and we'll continue the way it is. There is going to be major changes in Iraq after the IS is done. And if the Iraqi leaders are visionary and they're smart, they should be thinking of the day after now. Because status quo ante is not gonna work. I think I still have Iraq. I'm all in Iraq. I'm not gonna give up on Iraq. I left Iraq once. I'm not gonna leave it again. Although I am an American and I come back here. I mean, I love the electricity, guys, and I love the fact that you can turn on the water and it's like there is hot water. But Iraq is exciting. I mean, okay, so I worked on the Marshes, but I also started the university in northern Iraq not alone, but with a company. We started the American University of Iraq, and we've graduated. Actually, we're graduating our 4th cohort come May. It's who would resist being in California in 1849? I do engineering without planning commission. Modeling. Let's do it by trial and error. Let's dig a hole here and let's see what happens. And it's wonderful. It's a great place to work.
I love the optimism. That actually then takes me really to my next question on, you can't today speak of Iraq or the Middle East as a whole without talking about ISIS. And how the petrodollars, and to be more specific, Saudi petrodollars, have gone into the creation of this extreme group that is beyond anything we've seen in the past. So we see that in that respect, as well as in other respects, oil and energy and the environment are linked in so many ways. So on the one side, the petrodollars have created ISIS. On the other side, we've also seen oil and gas companies more recently putting vast amounts of money into protecting and restoring the environment. How do you see this trend benefiting your project? So to begin with, if you can touch upon, and most people raise that question with the Saudi petrodollars. Right. I know most of our members raise that question. If you can touch upon that, I know we discussed it today with our school students.
Okay. So twofolds, Salafism, Wahhabism, petrodollar, and environment and oil. All right. So 40 years ago, when I was growing up in Iraq, there was Sunni and Shia, and we knew that the Saudis are Wahhabi, but it's a small sect. And we knew, like from history, the Wahhabis used to come at Karbala every 25 years, 30 years. They come in and they would have a war to, I don't know, when there's famine, they come and raid Karbala and Najaf and go back. But they're a small little sect in the middle of the desert in Ta'if. And those of you who are Arab will recall that Kulthum, when Kulthum was singing, the audience, you'd have shot of the audience, and maybe you'll see 1 or 2 women with head cover. It was a lot more liberal 40 years, 50 years ago than it is today. Well, petroleum gets exploited in Saudi Arabia. Workers start going there, and all of a sudden, Salafism has become a majority. The Azhar, the oldest university in the world, teaches 4 sects: Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali. Thank you. And these are the sects of they don't teach Salafi. Salafi is, in fact, the name Salafi is going back to the roots, Salaf al-Salih, even before Shia and Sunnah. Now, we Shia in Iraq, we consider ourselves the 5th sect, and of course they don't consider us a sect, we're the heretic, but take that aside. In the history of Iraq, there was never a civil war between Sunnah and Shia, in the history of Iraq. 1980 happens, we use the Saudi money to sponsor jihadis, right, to defeat the Soviet Union. 1980, we're done. So when 1980 we're done. When was it? 89, we're done, and we leave the jihadis. Unintended consequences. Taliban, there's an inner war, and then Taliban takes over, and then, but forget this is Afghanistan and Pakistan and India. But the Arab world itself has become more conservative, has become saturated with Salafi thought as a result of the petrodollar. Now, why does the United States not tell Saudi Arabia to tone it down? That's something you're going to have to ask the administration. I've asked this question publicly in several fora. No satisfactory answer has been given. It's an internal issue, but okay, where we're going with this, I don't know. Islam needs to do its own reformation, but that's a side issue. The issue right now, the war in Iraq is war by proxy. It's Iran versus the rest of the world being played by Syrian lives and Iraqi lives. And until they settle the nuclear file with Iran, I think it's going to go on. Back to the marshes and the environment. Look, oil companies are not stupid. I don't think BP wants to have a repeat of Mexico, Gulf of Mexico. They don't want to see a repeat of Nigeria. They have internal rules, internal regulations, and truth be told, they're stronger than the Iraqi government regulations. In Iraq, we have the government of Iraq, and then we have a government unto itself called the Ministry of Oil, SOC. SOC does what it wants. SOC employees think of themselves as above everybody else. And when you talk about don't dump this oil here, and what are you talking about? Just get out of the way, get out of the way. And so, frankly, I find myself in an interesting position. I am inside the Iraq advocating for international oil companies to come and develop the Iraqi oil resource, because I know that Iraq needs the money, the world needs the oil. It's going to be done whether I like it or not. So I might as well see a company that I can talk to, a Shell, an ExxonMobil, a Phillips, a Total. I don't like to see Russians and Chinese because, well, what am I going to do? Go complain in the Kremlin or demonstrate in the Tiananmen Square? But Shell, hey, we can talk. I know a few enterprising press people. You do something bad, it's going to reach the audience. At least that language they understand. The Chinese, go drink from the sea. I'm one of those environmentalists that basically says, let's go. Let's bring in the international oil company. The more international oil companies, the more Western oil companies that are in Iraq, the better for the stability of Iraq, the better for the environment, strangely enough.
So if we take that thinking, the World Affairs Council in March is hosting Richard Sandor, who is seen as one of the pioneers in the world on emerging financial and environmental markets. So have you explored any opportunities associated with using these financial markets to fund your projects, the likes of carbon credits? You spoke of trade being the solution for the Middle East.
And trade is definitely, if Iraq has an income from restoring these marshes, there's an added incentive. And right now, the restoration of the marshes is being done for the marsh Arabs. Think about it. They're actually earning their living from the marshes. But eventually, these people are going to find jobs. They're going to move on, and then what? And so, yeah, that's for the future. It would be great if Iraq can get some sort of carbon credit for all the restoration, 4,000 square kilometers of marshes that did not exist in 1997. Although the rules are written in such that Iraq cannot get credit for that because you're supposed to go back to 1990, and in 1990 we had great. It doesn't work that way, but we'll find a way. There is the clean development mechanism. There's many ways, and if Iraq can create an income from carbon credits, all fantastic. And I'm talking to a couple of people in your audience about these ideas, and yes, we should explore them. Iraq is a developing country, not a developed country, so there are opportunities to do this. I see ecotourism, believe it or not, as actually a great potential for income for the people in the South. We have 20,000 workers in the oil fields. Iraq is going to be drilling 16, just Rumaila oil field, 1,600 oil wells. It's an incredible amount of drilling that's going to happen. But even after that, there's going to be a lot of foreign workers, and these foreign workers are being flown every 6 weeks. I know some companies where they have rotating guys. One guy there is 1 month, while his replacement is here. That's money. And if we reach a point where, in fact, we can create some sort of recreation, kayaking, you know, those birders, maybe a camp in the middle of the marshes. You don't have to fly them all the way to Dubai for recreation, Western recreation. You can have your own recreation in the marshes. And even in the summer, instead of the marshes, we take them to the mountains of Kurdistan. There's a lot of ecotourism potential in Iraq. I mean, the mountains of Iraq, the mountains of Kurdistan are more pristine than those, so far, than those of Switzerland. Unfortunately, they're underlain by oil, and there's more and more development for oil there. But at least the leadership in Kurdistan is a lot more visionary, a lot more proactive than the leadership in Iraq. They're actually bringing in expertise. I mean, they're smart enough to know that they don't know. Baghdad, believe it or not, does not know that they don't know. Think about that.
Well, that then takes us to actually our first question from the audience. It's a very optimistic vision you have of ecotourism. How can Iraq make progress with Sunnis bombing Shias every day and the rise of ISIS and so on?
Look, ISIS is going to be defeated. Enough time, it's going to be defeated. There's no thought this crazy can last. It's impossible. The trick is not in Iraq. The trick is in Tehran. Tehran. No, Tehran as in Iran, as in solving the nuclear problem. What you have in Iraq is a war by proxy. Let me repeat it again. It's funny enough, Israel on the same side as Turkey, as Saudi Arabia against Iran. I cannot put it any simpler than that. Do I need to explain more? All right, so once the Iran files are settled, there's no need to maintain the tension. Right? If there's no need to maintain the tension, things will go back. People will start making money. Iraqis will be busy if Iraq raises from 4 million barrels a day, or from 3.1 million barrels a day to 10 million barrels a day, think of how much money there's going to be floating in Iraq. Think of the business that can be done. People are going to be busy making money. Sunni, Shia, who cares?
You know, I find it ironic that, the conflict in the Middle East has been termed in terms of a clash of civilizations. And yet here we have the Ma'dan in the south, whom, as you said, were deemed backwards. You know, growing up in Iraq, they were the backward members of society. Yet those were the people that had lived a sustainable living for 8,000 years. And it is what we deem to be the civilized bunch that has and continues to destroy that region, which I find very ironic.
Yeah, I mean, the Marsh Arabs did not know that their way of life is sustainable living. They were just living their life. I don't want to over-romanticize it, by the way. It's a tough life, especially in the summer. I mean, mosquitoes, the humidity. I mean, I've been in Houston in the summer, and yeah, it's about that. It may be even worse. But it's an incredible, I mean, they have developed, I got to tell you this story. All right, so agriculture was invented around the marshes, in the edges of the marshes, in the grasslands. Why? So the flood comes, all the land gets covered with water, right? Flood. And then the water starts receding. The highlands start showing up. So the men and women go out and they start broadcasting seeds. Broadcasting. All right? So they broadcast seeds. But what happens twice a day, you have the tidal action. Now, the sea does not go all the way to there, but the sea goes up and down. So the flow, the speed of the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates kind of slows down. So there's a backup of a sort. So the highlands get covered twice a day with water. Automatic irrigation, ladies and gentlemen. You know, you all have to do is broadcast the seed and wait for nature to allow the seeds to become seedlings. A month later, okay, so these highlands are not getting covered with water anymore because so the young kids and the women go out and notice I'm saying young kids and women. Men sit inside the Madif to talk about politics. So they go out and collect these seedlings and they go plant them in the lower hinterlands, right? And these are subject to irrigation twice a day. So you don't have to do any work. Hard work at the beginning, hard work in the middle. Oh, sorry. Okay. Hard work in the middle. You have automatic irrigation. By the time the tidal action goes away, the roots have penetrated, they're into the groundwater. By the time the groundwater recedes, the seeds are ready to harvest. It's October. Mankind is not stupid. Agriculture was started there because automatic irrigation works. It's an ingenious, indigenous irrigation system. It's incredible. I mean, we think talk about backwards. Isn't that beautiful? Seriously, isn't that beautiful? So, that's why, I mean, the more I read about these people, the more I was like, wow, I'm glad I come from there.
We've got a couple of questions from the audience as to how you funded your project in 2003 and how do you continue to fund it going forward?
Continue to funding. Iraq is a failed state, so raising funds is not easy anymore. But here is how it goes. In the beginning, Nature Iraq was sponsored by a grant from the Italian Ministry of Italian Ministry of Environment and Global Territory. I don't know, IMET. And then we got a grant also from USAID, although I will never work with USAID again. And anybody here, never work with USAID. You know, you'll spend so much time on paperwork that you don't do work. You're just doing paperwork. I worked also sponsored by Canada, CEDA. We worked a little bit with Japan, with UNEP. More recently, I have started working with oil companies, doing environmental impact reports, socioeconomic studies. But I've resolved, the board and I resolved that no more than 30% of our income comes from oil companies because we don't want to be dependent on oil companies, and then what do? You bite the hand that feeds you. And so, you know, we don't want to be in the position, we want to be always in the position of being able to kind of demonstrate, at least in Texas. In Iraq, you don't demonstrate. In Iraq, you get killed. And more recently, I've tried to adopt a new model. On my board now are rich Iraqi merchants who donate $50,000 a year for projects. And I've changed the focus of Nature Iraq. We started actually as an engineering science, right? I mean, I'm an engineer with a PhD in engineering, so I'm using my scientific knowledge. The future is basically towards lobbying and just grassroots work. We're about to publish a book called The Key Biodiversity Areas of Iraq, in which the data from 10 years of work is collected, designating areas in Iraq that are worthy of being protected. And so my next 10 years is going to be trying to create more protected areas in Iraq and working on the water issue between Turkey and Iraq. And here's one crazy idea. We have 25 million mines between Iraq and Iran.
These are not coal mines.
No, they're not coal mines. These are land mines, personnel mines, 25 million. All right? More than people. Ironically, guys, because of these land mines, wildlife has recovered. Right? Hunters don't go there because really at pain of death. Right? And so the Persian leopard population has increased, the wild goats have increased, wildlife is doing fine. You know, every now and then a leopard blows his hand off and he dies. Oh well. But so what I'm trying to do is stop Iraq from removing the mines. Keep the bloody mines in place.
Unintended consequences.
And so, I mean, why not create peace parks along the border between Iraq and Iran? Okay, and maybe explore some passageways for hiking, and then some camping areas, and literally do not go outside those paths because you might blow your leg off, right? Save the money. Why spend $200 million doing a job half-baked? So I mean, but it's all about, you know, I'm known as the crazy guy. You know, I'm known as the guy with the ideas that are just kind of outside the box. But literally, I mean, fight with me. Really, talk to me about logic. Isn't it more logical to keep the mines in place? I mean, they're plastic mines. You can't find them.
That takes us to our last question from the audience. What can be done to prevent the Mosul Dam from collapsing?
I mean, obviously grouting. But what I say to the Iraqi engineers, I said, let's decommission Mosul Dam. And by decommissioning, I'm not saying remove the dam, right? I'm saying empty the reservoir, store the Iraqi water in Eliso, and leave the dam just in case Turkey changes its mind, take your money and we don't want you to store your water in our land, go store it in your land, okay? So leave it as a backup. But if there's no water, there's no danger. So meanwhile, while you're storing water in Eliso, you can work on a fix of some sort. You can actually dig a 600 feet deep hole and fill it with concrete. I don't know. But drilling holes on the blind and expecting to build a waterproof dam underneath this dam is it's ridiculous. Anyway, by the way, in 300 years, all these dams, all these reservoirs are going to be filled with dirt. So all we have to do is last 300 years, or nature is going to last 300 years. Unfortunately, it's going to be my great 6 generations or more of Iraqis before the dams are over. But yeah. I think I blattered enough.
Well, one of the things that the World Affairs Council is starting is a series called Through the Lens. We're bringing documentaries, and actually yours is the first one, is our opening one.
Ooh.
And we're showing it tomorrow at the River Oaks Theatre between 7 and 8:30. So please, I highly encourage you to watch the full documentary. Thank you very much, Dr. Azzam.